Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Breakthrough Nation Live Chat. And guess where we're broadcasting from? Gippsland. Gippsland is an amazing city. And I'm here with some amazing people. We've just done a conference. It started yesterday in a cafe, in a restaurant. And then we have an amazing day, full day today. And this evening, we decided to just record this message so that we can capture what God is doing here in this beautiful city and broadcast it so that everybody can see and hear what God is doing in this beautiful place of Gippsland. So we've got amazing people. They will be sharing some thoughts. Again, as I said, we really want you to hear what God is doing in this beautiful place. And so before I ask the questions, I'm going to go either to my right or my left and get everybody to say hello to you, introduce themselves, and then we come back into some amazing questions. So maybe we'll go this way first. Graham, would you like to just say hello, introduce yourself? And we'll go that way, and then we'll come around this way. So let's do it.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. Really great to catch up with you guys for the first time. And the ministry today was fantastic. We've really enjoyed it. You've blessed us. We're grateful for that. My name's Graham Gunning. This is my wife, Deanna. Say hi.
Hello.
And we've been in Sale since '94. Been the ministers of the church here, Kingsway Christian Centre, since 1999. And seen, lots of things in our city, and God doing an amazing thing, just bringing the churches together so that He can bring about His will and purpose in the region.
That's wonderful. We'll go to Dr. Reverend and his beautiful wife. Please say hello.
Hello, I'm Jeremy. This is my wife, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm Sarah. Hello.
Right, we have been in Sale for a very long time. It's just little more than 2 months. But it is like we have been here for years. And I say this because of the soul connection that comes by God creating a divine connection with Pastor Brian and Lynn, Pastor Graham and Dee. It's been amazing. It's like we have known each other for years because the frequency are the same. And it's a blessing to just say hi through Breakthrough Nation.
Thank you so much. And we're going to go to my left here. Here's the man himself. And today I actually just called him the governor of this city. So eat your heart out if you're jealous about that new title. But Brian, it's been an honor and a joy to be in your city. And I'll let you say a few things about you and your beautiful wife, and then we'll come back for some questions.
Okay, thanks very much, David, for coming and joining us here in Sale, which is in the heart of Gippsland. Lynn and myself have been here. We're nearly 30 years the pastor of this particular church, and we were appointed to the ministry here on Remembrance Day 1992, and that date had been given to us in a dream 8 years before. So it's sort of been a real prophetic journey here in the city, and we were newlyweds when we came here, really, and our family grew here, and it's been an amazing journey. And then just 3 years ago, God brought us into these stables, which is the original Cobb & Co stables here in Gippsland. So where we are sitting right now is one of the most significant highways or pathways into Sale, and the Cobb & Co stables used to come in here right exactly where we are now, and then spend the night here and then go out into Gippsland through the highway, which is that back door there. So it's an amazing story. So this is my wonderful wife Lynn, who's just let me drag her around the countryside. We came here, it's 36 years ago to the city, and Lynn's just been the most fabulous partner in ministry during that time. So Lynn, say hello to everyone.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here and saying hello. And he has dragged me around, but it's been a team effort, so I went willingly.
good evening are from this amazing place called Gippsland. If you're watching tonight, you're looking at some of the most amazing people who've gathered together here for a purpose. And they've actually been on holiday for the last couple of years due to lockdown. But God is ready to move, and he's preparing a group of people to continue on the great work that began some years ago, and I'm down here today just to stand with them and help and push to make everything that's in the heart of God for this area. I want to just be with this company of people to make it happen. God is going to move, and God is going to use these people here. You're looking to tonight at an alliance of people who are totally and completely sold out to advance the kingdom of God here in this area of Gippsland. So it's great that you're tuning in tonight to hear what God's up to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Norman. And your wife and my wife cannot fit the setup tonight. They're just sitting at the back listening to us. But you guys already seen them on this show, on this platform. However, tonight, as we've said, this is a special night. Broadcasting to you live from Sale, Gippsland. And I have a question. The first question I want to ask is the history of the journey. And I know that Norman alluded to that. You guys met, and I want to start with you, Brian, and maybe Norman can jump into this, but you met way back, and God spoke to you about something significant about your city, which you have been working tirelessly over the years to bring it to where it is right now. So first question is, can you just tell us a little bit about how this journey started for you, Brian and Lynn, and how Norm fits into that?
Absolutely. Well, it has been, for us a real, I think the stagecoaches that would have come through here would have had a bumpy ride on occasions.
Very.
And it's been a beautiful journey, but there also has been, the challenges. Lynn and myself came to the Lord together on our honeymoon. We received the Lord at a Billy Graham crusade in Sydney in 1979, and that's where we started out. And we'd been through, during that time, we'd just been through an incredible family tragedy with the loss of my niece in a tragic farming accident, and then 18 months later my older brother was taken from us in a car accident. So it was a really tragic, difficult time. But during that time, both Lynn and myself really went on a search to find out who this Jesus was. And, it was about 2 years after we got married that we both fell to our knees in our lounge room in Bendigo and received the Lord. And from then on, God began to move in our life. We were moved with my job in the bank to a place called Albury, up on the Murray River. And we were just really had an amazing church up there, and amazing leaders, and we were very well discipled and trained. And we would have been happy to stay there for life. But during that time, God began to stir in our hearts, didn't he, Lynn? And we knew that God was moving us on from there. Wow. And it was the last night that we were in that city that the Lord gave me a dream with a date. And the date was the date of our appointment to this ministry on the 11th, 1992. Wow. So, and he gave us a scripture, and it was 2 Corinthians 2:14. But thanks be to God, who always causes us to triumph, and through us spreads the fragrance of his knowledge in every place. So the bank moved me to Morwell. In those days, they just used to give you the letter, and you were off to wherever they'd send you. And we were sent in the bank to Morwell. And one day, Lynn and myself just decided to come for a drive over here to Sale. Wow. And we had a cup of coffee at Marsh's Deli, which is just across the main street from here. And we both remember that day because the coffee, well, it was okay. But anyway, what happened is we were there sitting on the outside, and I looked across the road at the archway, Out the front of this building is a most incredible archway, and it's got Cobb & Co stables.
Oh, wow.
But in my mind's eye, I saw so clearly, it was like an open vision is what I would call it. And I saw Jesus is Lord written in yellow scripted writing across that archway.
Yeah.
And
Just sorry to interrupt, but you're talking about this building
I'm
now,
talking
in which
about this building.
we're using. So how many years ago was it when you received that vision? It's amazing how you saw that way back, and the actuality is we're sitting here in that very place, broadcasting to the world.
Exactly.
How long ago was this?
It's I think it's 37 years, David. It's 37 years, 36 years because I was 29 at the time. And I just said to Lynn, there's going to be a church in there one day. And never realising that I would ever live in the city, but the bank then 6 months later moved us into the city, and you know, that prophetic journey really began. Yeah.
Lynn, did you want to add on to that? Because I know that the coffee was okay, but God has something else, in mind on that trip. So just to share a little bit about the beginning of the journey.
Well, I don't really know, because we got shifted here in the bank not that long later, and then the church opened up here that we started going to, and so we decided to knit ourselves in there, and I guess we worked our way up there. Like, we started off just going, and then we did the youth, and then the whole thing sort of fell apart for the health of the pastor. He couldn't do it anymore, so they were looking for somebody. And
Hello and
we
behold.
got asked to do it, and we actually, it was interesting because that dream that Brian had 1914 at the top, which was the beginning of the Great War. And at the bottom now, thanks be to God who causes us to triumph in every place. And what happened was, we didn't set the time or the day, but our oversight asked us to come and see them because they wanted to ask us to take over the church. Now, at that time in our life, everything had crashed around us, kind of. We'd gone broke, all sorts of things. And they came and asked us if we would take the church. And I remember the day they asked us was the 11th of the 11th, which is, as we know, the end of hostilities. It's when the fighting stopped.
Yeah.
And then the scripture. So we were sitting there, and I looked up at the clock, because there was one directly in front of me, when Pastor Barry and Louise asked us, and it was 11:11.
Wow.
It was 11 o'clock on the 11th.
Wow.
And it was like,
So there was
we couldn't say no. And then we said to them, well, we can't do it unless this and this happens. And that
they all happened,
happened
yeah.
within a week. It's like,
yeah.
okay, I think I get the message.
Wow.
Because I said to Brian before that, there is no way I'm ever going to be a pastor.
Oh,
God
wow.
would have to write it in the clouds. And
Yeah. You became the perfect candidate for the job when you say no to God. Yeah, he does not take no for an answer.
Yeah.
And how do you fit into that picture, Norman? Because I know way back in the beginning of our session, you talked about supporting, have been here many years. I just wanted to make the connections between you, Brian, and Lynn. And we're going to go this way because we need to hear from you guys and your journey too. And everything seems to all just come together perfectly.
Well, I first met Brian in 1999, and like me, he had signed on for a 1-month live-in discipleship course to find out more about the emerging apostolic dimensions that God was beginning to release throughout the nations. And we used to walk each morning, go on a long walk, and we walked and we talked, and so we really got to know one another, and I got to know Brian, and then after the 1 month course was finished, I felt to go down to Sale, to Victoria, and meet some other of the Australians who were embracing all these new apostolic dimensions. And so then I met Graham and Deanne, and of course we hit it off together, and at that time we were full of enthusiasm to see the kingdom of God advancing, and I think from memory we were getting revelation about the kingdom of God and how it could advance by all the revelation that God was releasing. And so I think what brought me down was Pastor Brian and the team of people here in Sale were beginning to put a school of kingdom advancement, and man, that just bore witness to me, and I wanted to get down there and be a part of this and just push. And so this is why I'm back again, because it's time to give this another push, and this time we have got apostolic leadership and new dimensions that God has added to our lives, and now I just feel we're ready to go.
Yeah. I like what you said there about giving it another push, because there's been many push in the past that has led us to this critical moment that we have experienced this weekend, which I want to talk about. But we're going to go this way to you, Graham, and just tell us your journey and how did you guys came together now with Brian and Norm, and I can't wait to hear from the Reverend Doctor himself. But we'll go with you, Graham.
Thanks, David. Again, it's great to be here and it's a great privilege for Deanna and I to be amongst a company of people that we have come to love very, very dearly. My history is I was 20 years in the military. I joined the Air Force at 17, moved around the countryside. We were posted overseas to Malaysia in 82, and in 1983, in a foreign country, the Lord showed up on our doorstep and we both got saved. So that was June 83, and it was an amazing time, because I remember sending word home to my parents to say we'd found God, and that he was amazing and he was real, and during the space of 1983 to the end of 1984, every one of my family members had an encounter with God. Every one of them. And we came back in 84. We served. We had servant hearts, didn't we, honey? And we just served. We just loved to serve. And so we served in the various churches that were in the location that we happened to be posted with the military. And our last 5-year posting was to Sale from 94 to 99. I remember rolling in here in January, towards the middle to the end of January, and we were sort of brand new in the area, didn't know anyone, and Deanna met Lynn at the Salvation Army, an event they were having there.
So this connection with Lynn happened on the very first week or day, or?
It would have been within a fortnight of being here.
Okay, great. That's good.
Very soon after arriving here.
Wow.
And Deanna came home and said, "Hey, you got to meet these people. I think they're one of us, or we're one of them, or something." So and I remember then the first week of February, we accepted an invitation to go over to Brian and Lynn's home with our children and their children, and we had a meal. I remember that we had that meal. It's just so vivid in my mind. I met Brian for the first time, and I can't explain what happened. It just our lives just connected. It was supernatural. We didn't understand. I didn't understand it, but I just knew that that this was an unusual friendship. That this was something that I didn't understand, but it was going to be very meaningful. At that point, we didn't even know we were going to be pastors in 5 years' time. I mean, we were assistant pastors at the time, and sort of so the journey sort of began from there, and I've got to say that really we have, from that moment, we've met pretty much every week.
Oh, wow.
With some exceptions, but pretty much every week we've loved one another, we've supported one another, we have confided in one another. We, our lives have become so entwined together, and we've coming to understand that it's a part of the destiny that God has
Love it.
for this city. But now I'm coming to understand it's a part of the destiny for the region.
Wow.
Do you want to add
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, but before you speak, and we're going back 30 years now, almost 30 years that you guys first met, and you're still here, going all out for God. I mean, I want to hear more about what's been happening recently, but please feel free to share your part in the journey.
Well, yes, I met Lynn, of course, initially first at a homeschooling. We were both homeschooling, and we were both still breastfeeding our youngest babies back then, but yes, the connection was there and instantaneous. But we knew that the friendship, as Graham had said, was more than your normal kind of friendship. There was something more. We just knew that it would take us on further, that we could do so much more together. And since that time, we have worked together on everything. We've been through some really rough times together, all of us. And we just know that we've got each other's back, that we've got those that we can rely on. When we were going through a rough time, Brian and Lynn would call us most days, if not every day. How's it going? They'd pray with us, they'd come and visit us, and vice versa when things were the other way with those guys. And we talk a lot about God. Every time we're together, that's what we talk about. We talk about, well, what's God doing? What's God saying to you? We push each other along. Sometime I'm still trying to get Brian to finish his book. Yes.
I'm just going with the flow.
And that's sort of what we do with each other. We push each other along. Sometimes we don't always agree. It's not always, roses, as it were. We've had some disagreements, and we function differently. As Brian said, he goes with the flow. Graham and I are more organised and, very structured in some things, conservative, if you like. But you learn in covenant relationship, which is what this is, that you, for the sake of the relationship, for the sake of the bigger picture, that you're there for the long haul. So you work it out. Or you put your big girl panties on and you keep going,
I like that. I like that expression. Perfectly said. Now we're going to come to Jeremy and Sarah. They're a very interesting couple. We met you guys for the first time yesterday. And goodness, God has brought you here for a purpose. Can you just tell us how you fit into all of this?
God, who is sovereign, who 49 years ago brought Sarah and me to the saving faith. She came to the Lord December 6, 1972. I came to the Lord 26 December 1972. And our pastor discipled us saying, learn to obey, learn to obey. So we went on that for a long time. And recently, in 5 years' time, God said, I'm going to shift you from obedience to implicit obedience. Of course, I was very excited. I said, that's cool, that's chill. I said, okay, Lord. I just kept quiet. And in 2018, the prophet comes from, Sydney, and he says, the plane was touching down on your tarmac, and the Lord said, tell my servant to wind up and come for the rest of his life to Australia. I said, are you crazy? I picked him up from the airport. I said, are you crazy? I said, I'm very well in India. We are just having such a great work in India and the neighboring countries, and especially also in Africa. I said, I'm very happy. I don't need to leave India. He shocked me. He said, implicit obedience. Wow. So we dropped everything. Just dropped everything. In 2019, September, we came here. We did not know where to go. We went to Darwin, and Sarah kept jumping. This is not the place. This is not the place. This is not the place.
That was just before COVID hit,
Yeah, just
right?
before the COVID.
Wow.
So after we came, COVID came. And here I'm trying to find out, because in India, from Indian context, United States of America is the promised land, never Australia. So everybody said, you're going to Australia? I said, it's not that I'm going, I'm told to go. Anyway, so I don't know what's happening here in Australia. And Sarah said, Darwin is not the place. Darwin is not the place. Okay, let's try Brisbane. She said, Brisbane is not the place. I said, what the heck?
Why'd
man?
you have
We are
to say
trying
that
get
about
our
Brisbane?
roots. Yeah, come on, man. I said all the time. Then I said, okay, you ask God, why are you putting it on me? She said, you're the head. And she said, you're the prophet. I said, okay. And then one of our Solomon Island friends visited us in Brisbane. He said, what are you doing here? Come to Gatton. I said, what is Gatton? I was so ignorant. I said, what is Gatton? It's a place. Oh, it's a place. Okay. So we came to Gatton, and as we were coming there, packing up, God said, I'm taking you to your Brook Cherith. I said, okay. And we were enjoying Brook Cherith. The ravens were feeding us. The water was coming. And it was very nice in Brook Cherith, and very quiet place, tucked in away. And suddenly my friend from Germany called and said, hey, Jeremy, what are you hiding in the cave of Australia? Come out. I said, what are you being abusive to me? He said, come out, says the Lord. I said, where do we go? Then I told Sarah, let's go back home because Brook Cherith is drying up. It's totally drying up. Let's get out. And I said, I don't know what to shine. She, as stubborn as she can be, and she said, no. The Lord said Australia. I said, okay, so I have 2 against 1. The Lord, Sarah, and I'm alone. Then we were praying our heart out, and suddenly Brian calls us one morning. Okay, I must say this.
When did he call you? Is this 2019?
2022,
Okay.
March.
Oh, this is just recent.
Yeah, he
Wow.
called, and it's unique. His church people laugh because Brian called in the morning. We just finished our time with God, and Sarah said, who's that? I told Brian, because I was, and he said, hey guys, how are you doing? I said, everything is going well. And he said, have you, considered, coming this side? I said, okay. And I said, Lord, do you want us to go there? I said, okay, we know Brian and Lynn. I said, we do not know anybody else there. And the Lord said, I am shifting you from Brook Cherith to
Promised
Zarephath.
land. The promised land.
No, Zarephath. Zarephath.
Okay.
Then I said, okay, what to do? Okay. And suddenly, okay, he said, I have commanded, the principle is this, I have commanded a widow to take care of you. And here we were trying, and that's the time Pastor Graham very kindly came, trying for all kinds of houses. And he said, it's getting very difficult. I said, I do not know. And suddenly his dear daughter told him, I'll have those 2 of them.
Yeah.
She's single, so it's a principle of coming to Zarephath.
Yeah.
I said, okay, so start there. It just happened.
Yeah. So because of our time, Jeremy, so you moved over when exactly to this beautiful place?
May.
There? Okay. And
2022.
Sarah, did you want to say something about that decision to move?
Well, all I can say is we have learned over our years not to question God when He says something, especially when He says, move. We just move. And one of the things, I must say this, is wherever we had gone, I have this habit of planting a garden. But this time I said, Lord, I'm not going to plant a garden. Because every time I plant one, you say move. And I think God was having a laugh at me. But it's amazing how all He wants is my obedience.
Yeah.
He steps in and He just takes over. And that's the amazing thing. I won't say it's been a very easy time, this 2.5 years, 9 months. It has been difficult. And but in the midst of it all, God has come through, and He said, no, I'm there with you. Carry on, carry on.
That's wonderful.
So that's the way it's been.
Yeah. So enjoying this beautiful place so far?
Yes, of course.
Yes, otherwise we would not have met. Well, this is so good so far. You are hearing some insight into how everything begun for Brian and also for Graham and everyone else on this panel, and also how everyone have sort of come into the picture, because God is a God of big picture, but he's also a God that pays attention to the details of that big picture. I want to ask the next question, and Brian and also Graham, be really nice for you to speak into this, and your wives, about the struggles that you have faced ever since the beginning of this vision. We've talked about how it all started. Being here this weekend, I've heard some stuff that went down, and you're still here. And would love to start with you, Brian, and Lynn, feel free to jump into that. Just share with us some of the struggles, because many people think that when God calls you to do something, it's all going to be fine, you know? You touch on that it's not all bed of roses. There are thorns, and yeah, that's it. It comes with the call. So let's hear that right now. Brian and Lynn, you go first.
Okay. Well, I think as soon as you genuinely say yes to, follow Jesus, there's a destiny ahead for us, and there's a big picture, there's a dream, there's, rivers to be crossed, and there's giants to be killed, cities to be taken. That's the reality. But, at the beginning of the journey, you're not sort of the person that is able to, fulfill that. And I think God starts to put you through a process. So, Lynn and myself have been here for leading this church for nearly 30 years. And during that time, there's been, the just joy of being in the presence of God, leading people into the presence of God, seeing people grow and develop. But at the same time, I think there's this reality. We do have an adversary, the devil. And we have right now we're in the midst of, serious cultural wars. Everything is changing. I think one of the things that happened is when I first went to the School of the Prophets in Malaysia, Dr. Jonathan David prophesied over me, and he said, when you're going to go home, it's going to be like all hell breaks loose. And sometimes when you get a prophetic word like that, you just sort of have a bit of a laugh about it and think, right. I was thinking maybe there'll be a bit of a disturbance for a couple of weeks or something like that, but that's 27 years ago. And yeah. So we have had our challenges. I think it went into a serious next level 7 or 8 years ago when the whole same-sex marriage debate came up. And, we took our place, sharing our conviction, and I was asked by the Australian Christian Lobby to take a lead role here in Gippsland, which we did. And then I also stood for Family First as a candidate for Gippsland to give people an alternative voice. So I had no idea what I was getting myself involved in when I stepped into that realm. And when I did, it was sort of like a two-edged sword. I hated the tension that it caused, the whole thing. I hated that, but at the same time, I really felt called to it. And just something seems to have grown there. And this is an interesting thing. The very first time that I met Jeremy was around about that time in Malaysia, where he walked up to me at a conference, and he was really a stranger to me, and he said, God has called you to this, to government. He's called you to Canberra. That's what he said. Now, I'm still trying to work out exactly what that means, but I believe that over our church and over our network of relationships, there is a governmental call. So we're coming to understand that, and so there's been lots of accusation that's come, lots of falsehoods, But in the midst of it, God has worked absolute miracles. For instance, when we were in the midst of the plebiscite, where a young lady, Heidi, who's grown up as virtually our own daughter in the house, she went out and she took the lead role and did a lot of the advertising. She was one of the mums in the plebiscite. Like, the attack was, it's hard to describe the words, what came against us during that time. And all we were was a group of people saying, hey, we don't agree with this. We weren't against anyone. But that was really, a time where God was allowing us to be shaken and reconfigured on the inside. Wow. So yeah, that was an amazing time. Yeah. What would you add to that, Lynn?
As a wife, Lynn, as a wife, and I know that he's touched on some of the struggles and, intense pressure, but as a wife, how were you dealing with these things?
Well, I guess it all comes back to knowing where God's called you to, because if you know that, then you just stand and you stick. Like, a lot of times I've felt like quitting, screaming, yelling,
But
all that kind of thing, but you just know you've got to stand, and God brings you through the storm.
Yeah.
And you grow.
You have just said something there that many people needs to hear, not only as a woman but as a pastor's wife, that sometimes you want to quit, and it's real, and it's okay to even mention that, because people think that if you're in God and you are pastoring a church, that you are protective of all the pain that everybody else goes through. What else were you going through, or how did you deal with all of these things during this time?
Well, I guess you've just got to, I don't know, like, you just keep going. Because there at one stage I didn't even want to leave the house.
Oh, wow.
Brian probably doesn't know that, but and one of my daughters took me out. But it was just the emotional thing of the particular attack that was coming against us at the time. But you just keep on keeping on. Like, when you've done all that you know to do, you stand. Yes. And that makes you stronger, and you've just got to believe that what God called you here for, He equips you for. So
it is so good to even hear you say that, because the enemy amplify the accusation that comes from people's mouths, but then he takes it to another level. Yeah. The fact that you mentioned that sometimes you didn't want to come out of the house, that's real. A lot of people are struggling with that. So, Norman, were you aware of what they were going through? Were there times where you guys were communicating, talking, praying together?
Well, I was aware that Brian had his challenges, because I know that when you put your hand to the plough and there's going to be trouble up ahead that you'd never even think about. Yeah. And I knew that Brian was under pressure, and one time we were talking on the telephone, and he was telling me a little bit about what was going on, and Pam and I, even though Brian was down here in Sale, and at that time we were up in Ipswich, we were praying for not only for Brian, we were covering Brian, we were covering the church, we were covering all the people who were connected with him, because I knew that what Brian and Lynn were going through, they had stepped up and they had stepped out, and the enemy was trying to come against them and in a real vicious way. And so we just, I guess what I would call it is, we were just standing in the gap for them and trying to lift some of that pressure off them. But yeah, we were aware that this is not going to be easy. But I also realize that over the years I've known Brian, I've just seen Brian grow and mature and come into greater levels of maturity. And same with Graham and Deanne, and I just think that when God calls you, He makes you able for the task.
yes.
So good. And it's also good to have friends, you know, when you're going through things like Job and his friends were a bit negative, Job's friends. But you're surrounded with good friends that are there for you. And Graham, with this covenant relationship that you guys have come into with Brian and Lynn, obviously the attack is individual, but also on a corporate level, because the devil knows that you guys have been brought together by God for something bigger than you, all of you. Did you face the same struggle or some of the things that the enemy tried to throw at you guys during the journey? And how did you overcome that?
I would say that in the earlier years, God was redefining me more than anything else. We took leadership of the church under some challenging circumstances, and I do want to say that God is incredibly merciful, incredibly gracious. There are people in our midst 23 years later who, God's done some amazing things in our lives, but he's done some amazing things in their lives, and they're still with us and we're still with them, and just see God just being so much more real in their lives and so much more meaningful in their lives, having gone through a very challenging, rocky start when we took leadership. We at that point, I'd also learned to come under a relationship with Dr. Jonathan David, whom I got to know through Brian, and we were learning about the apostolic, and it was all exciting, but it was all very new. So, it's a funny thing, but I remember the fathering sonship concept being downloaded to us, and coming back in my ignorance and talking about this in our church, and the response from our church, who were so willing to embrace the things that God was saying and doing, coming into a place where they're believing that they are now sons. And years later, we're realising that the journey into sonship takes time, takes effort, takes a lot of efforts. So the first number of years was challenging in that regard, God bringing order. We were steering the ship really in a different direction from where it had been. The people were very gracious, and God was incredibly merciful. We had some young people just really came into the place and have become really growing into sons and daughters in the house over the last 20 years. I remember personally, you always have days where you don't want to go to church, even though you're the pastor and you have to preach.
Oh, you went through the same thing too. I thought I was the only one.
So, but you just you step up and you go, and so it's just amazing how good God is. And sometimes I remember having conversations with the Lord where I'd not want to go, and he said, "You go. I'm going to feed the people through you, and I'll deal with you after." So, I just have watched God just faithfully love the people, give the people what he wanted to give them, and deal with me in the process. I remember us reaching 2013, and we both were wondering, could this be the end for us? Are we meant to move on? And we really went searching. We went to a conference overseas, and Deanna and I said, "God, we just said you've got to show us, Lord. If the work is to go further, does it need someone else to take it further? Does the city and the region need someone more than what is in us?" And both of us, in the very first session of the conference, God spoke to me, and I spoke to Deanna afterwards, and he spoke to her, said exactly the same thing. This is what he said: "I started with you, Graham and Deanna. I will finish with you."
Yeah. Deanna, did you want to add on to that, that word, and even some of the struggles that you as a wife went through? I like what he just said about sometimes he didn't want to go to church.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I had experienced that too, for the people who are listening. But it's so good to be able to hear another person say that. I thought I was abnormal.
No.
Thank you, Jesus.
Some Sundays we've looked at each other and we've said, "Can we just elope rope today. Can we just run away? But you go because, we know that we're called and that we're meant to be there. And again, it's about the bigger picture of what God wants, explicit obedience, as Pastor Jeremy and Sarah have rightly said too. And it's the call that keeps you there. And the people, yes, absolutely. Yes, I've had days like Lynn where I've wanted to be at home. I haven't wanted to go out. I haven't wanted to go to another meeting of some sort or another. Or you think, okay, I don't know whether I'm out of my league here. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like like I'm just not sure of what to do or where to go. And again, this is where having, good friends walking beside you, you can, just go and you've got a sounding board. Lynn, what do you think? Or Brian, what do you think? And now with Jeremy and Sarah here, the same. Or Pastor Norm and Pam, we know that we can ask them anything, or that we can share our hearts with them safely about our struggles. I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that. I know in some of our own struggles, I took a little while to bounce back. I felt like I'd hit a darker place, and Lynn and I met, and, we talked a lot about, how I was doing and, what was going through my head and all of those kinds of things. And I picked her brain, but she really helped to pick me up again, as it were, and just encouraged me to keep going. It's okay, it does get better, even though at the time you think, does it ever get better?
It's good to hear, and I want to just ask this. So you guys still pastoring the same church today?
Yes, we are, yeah.
Well, how many years now?
23
years. Wow.
Can I share one other
For
thing?
sure, go for it.
I remember going through a very intense time some years ago, and it was very interesting. It shook me to the core, and I was going through a process of some weeks, and I got to a point where I heard this voice say, "If you take your life, it'll all be over." And immediately, by the mercy of God, I recognised what that voice was, and I dealt with it there and then, and things began to turn around straight away. Yeah. But some things we go through are just murderous.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Wow. Look, we have time for one more question, but I believe that this is very important. I want to talk about what's happening today, because we've touched on how God divinely brought you together, the journey. If we have hours, we'll talk more and more about the journey and the good and the bad and the ugly and the ups and the downs. But the next 15 minutes, I want us to capture what is God doing today in Sale, Gippsland. And if you want to even extend that to Melbourne and this state, feel free to do that. But Brian, I want to go with you first. We just had an amazing time today, Brian, and God was speaking and ministering to us regarding the state of His kingdom now in Sale, Gippsland, and the things that He wants to do today going forward. So Brian, I want to just get you to give everybody an update on what's happening today, and how do you see this city, this region, being used by God in the future, which is today, really. I mean, to God, the future is now. So, yes. Brian, let's go for it.
Okay, well, it's a bit of an interesting thing, because our journey into ministry has been a progressive unfolding of vision. And I believe that when I saw that message in my mind's eye, some 36, 37 years ago, Jesus is Lord, that was the seed of the call. And, through a whole series of events, as Lynn explained earlier, and myself also, as we came to be asked to lead the church here. And I remember our first mission statement, because we were encouraged, you've got to have a mission statement. And our mission statement was to declare that Jesus is Lord to the Sale district. That. Yeah. And to train and equip and send people, into the region with that message. So that was the original mission statement that we had. But, God's taken us on this prophetic journey. And I think, initially it was to grow a strong church, and, we were growing our church and you were growing your church and everybody's growing their church. But over the years, God's processed us. He brought us into this realm of prophetic development and then apostolic understanding. And, really our heart is to see the city transformed. To see the absolute transformation of the city. But in the end, that can't happen unless I'm living a transformed life.
Right.
Unless I can transfer that technology into another person. So there is this thing of the transformation of the city. And what I see now, and this is the marvellous thing about you and Tina being here today, is what we are really seeing is not only the city, this is sort of like, the dot in the heart of Gippsland, but it's Gippsland rising together, to rebuild and to, see the restoration of the region. And, the words you brought today were amazing. And, the word that Tina brought about an ecosystem, because things are not going so well out there.
No.
And I believe that God is causing this, I like to call it Team Gippsland, rising together. And I believe that if we can cooperate right through, the way that we have right through the region, that we can really see this thing begin to happen and see the government of God begin to come in and bring restoration. So what I'm seeing is the rising of the corporate church in the cities and the regions to bring transformation, to see the government of God come, to see the ecclesia really begin to emerge in the region. So, and I believe one last thing, to impact the city in a dynamic and positive way, but to also even be an influence in the state of Victoria and in the nation as well.
Lynn, do you see the same thing, or you see something different, which are all adding on to the same picture, really, of what is God doing today in this beautiful region, Sale and also Gippsland, and the future?
I basically see the same kind of thing as Brian, although he's sort of more the one that's sort of stepping out there. But I can see God building people and bringing people to maturity, like sons and daughters and people like that will serve with you to bring it to pass. And really it's bringing the church to unity, like corporately, I think, because we can't do it on our own. And that's where you kind of see, if only the church could come on the one page, we could have such an impact. And so, you find the ones that you can work with, and you work with them, like you said today, that spirit of unity. And I think that's where we sort of wanting to go to, and to just bring God's kingdom here.
You guys got a new baby called Unity.
Yes. Yeah.
But your children are also doing really well, your biological children. You've got one that is in government, and a few others are doing amazing things in different spheres of society. Would you touch quickly on your kids?
Well, they're just, I think they're great, but every mother does. Well, we've got one of our daughters is not doing so great, just to bust the balloon there. But but she'll come round, and we do love her dearly.
That's good.
We do, her and and the kids. And our next biological daughter she's a chiropractor, and she's the one that's at work in the political domain, and she's plugging away there and doing okay. The next one down's Anita. She's assistant manager at the ANZ Bank here. She's doing well in that area. And then our son John and his wife, he's a auto electrician out at the RAF base. Well, he maintains the flight simulators, and him and his wife very much partner with us here in the ministry, and they're just, going well with that. Our youngest one is a chiropractor, and she's just moving to Ulladulla, a bit further away. So she's, and then we've got our fostered one, who's the one that was with the did the ads on the TV, and her and her husband are our assistant pastors here, and they're partnering with us here to bring about God's purpose in Sale. And then we've got spiritual sons and daughters.
Of course, you got heaps of them. Heaps of them.
Yeah.
So in the midst of the trials and tribulations and standing in obedience to the call, the Lord is blessing your kids.
Yeah, yes.
Nevertheless,
Yes,
because
yes,
the blessings outweigh,
Yeah.
all the hard times that you guys have faced. And I'm going to leave Norm to the end, and also Jeremy, because I want you guys to speak into this at the end. But I'll come to you, Graham, and your wife. What do you see for Sale Gippsland today and going into the future?
I'm seeing such turbulence in our world the last number of years, and everything that people have known is becoming under question, and things are changing, and I think there's communities and people that are hoping that things might return to the way they once were. I don't honestly believe that's going to happen. I believe that there's a shaking going on across the nations, which is I think God is wanting to bring something new even into the nations. But what I'm also seeing and believing is that there is a shake happening in the church. My heart is, for a long, long time, and Deanna and I, our hearts are for the church. We love the church, and we believe in the church and want to see the church being built. And the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 years, without me realising, God's giving me insight into seeing regional move of God. Rather than just city, and rather than just our own little local church. But seeing a regional move of God where he will draw, unusually, he will draw people together, not in the spirit of unity, but united in the spirit, which is different.
That's good.
It's different. So united in the spirit, which is more than just we get along because we just want to help the church down the road, but actually coming together in the spirit where I don't have an agenda for my partnership with Brian and Lynn. That they don't have an agenda in their partnership with me. But our only agenda is that our lives and our churches become a resource to God together, so that God can make himself known and revealed in not just now our city, which I believe he wants to do, but throughout our region. So that means that God is wanting to bring together pastors and leaders and churches. Now this is funny, because when you get married, some people think you lose your identity when you get married, but actually you find it in each other. And so when churches come under the moving of the Spirit, then we in our immaturity, we find our identity in what God is doing in us, in our church. But our more truer identity, our greater identity, is in each other as we come together without agenda, hearing God, loving and respecting and honouring the different graces that is working in the lives of the men and women of God and the churches that they represent, so that we become what I like to say is a formidable body of believers who can make such an impact in a region. We see the kingdom of God begin to manifest God's glory and bring blessing and bring accuracy back to our communities, because it's everything steering us away from what we've known to be truth. But I believe God wants us to re-establish truth that the Bible says will set people free.
Yeah. You know what you just said there, please feel free to speak into this also, but you said something so profound about yielding and humbling ourselves one to another. There is so much power in that to bring transformation to a region. And it's almost like the power to transform regions are already within us.
Yes.
The only reason why it's not manifesting is because we're still doing things for ourselves.
Correct.
In our own little kingdoms, and neglect the kingdom.
Yeah.
And if we can surrender to the King and to his kingdom, the power will be unleashed. Do you believe the same thing?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely do. I think, there's a job to be done, and that as we work together to accomplish that, we can achieve a whole lot more. But it's also what God had intended from the beginning. It was, I think God is bringing everything back to his original pattern, back to his original plan. Unfortunately, man has put his, man as in mankind, man has put his hand to the plough and steered things off course. So God is bringing it all back to his original pattern, where we're meant to work together, to stand together, to pray together, to worship God together, to do whatever it takes together to see his kingdom come and his glory. And that's what it's about, him being glorified in everything we do, no matter what that looks like. We are operating perhaps in some different areas than perhaps Brian and Lynn are, or that Jeremy and Sarah are, but together.
But the
it's still an
unity in
impact.
diversity that Jeremy spoke about today, diversity and unity, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we have our own strength, but if we could just yield to each other, then our weaknesses is cancelled out by everybody else's strength.
Absolutely. Yeah, our weakness becomes a strength. It does.
So good.
It's got to be something that God does.
Yeah.
It's not something we can do.
You have something here that other people needs to hear and come here to Sale Gippsland to get it. Just listen to what these guys are saying. The secrets are right here in the conversation. But you touched on, Jeremy, about the ancient pathways. She's just mentioned going back to the original design, going back to God's ways. And can you just touch on that with Sarah? And also, how do you see yourself fitting into what God is doing here today going forward?
Yeah. What I see is, when we came here, and the reason why God has brought us here is so that, there is no apprehension, there's absolutely no fear in the relationships. There is such a trust level, and it's more like a covenant. And when you talk of covenant is different from commitment. You can break a commitment, but covenant you cannot break, because it is established in heaven.
Yes.
It's a move of God. So I believe the reason why we are here is because of that.
Yeah.
We are in a covenanted relationship. I can speak even for Jeremy. We are not afraid of each other. We are not afraid to be ourselves. We are not afraid to speak our mind and to tell each other what we think, because we know we are brothers, we are sisters. We are all part of the same family, and we have one Father. So I think that's what we are here for.
That's just beautifully said.
And just to add on to what Sarah said, for many, many years in Christ and as a pastor, I was a master of being translucent and not being transparent. Physics is one of the subjects I like. So,
Yes,
you learn
yes.
about translucent and transparent, okay? And there was always a fear that if I'm transparent, people will, make use of my vulnerability and kill me. So why be transparent? And I've been for more than 25 to 30 years a pastor only performing. Getting everything all right. You can't find a mistake in me. Everything is there, performing. And you put me on the stage, I'll act in any scenario. Bible study, prayer meeting, you name it. Okay, but it's still performing. Because like Graham said, when I get back, I haven't got it right, but people do not know. They think just by performing, I got it right. And God had to tell me, you are just acting. And my stage is not for actors. It's for people who are real. And how it happened is, 96, I got a massive heart attack in March 11th, 1996. Okay, and God almost took my life. I said, spare my life. He said, why you want your life? I said, I want for Sarah and the children. He said, now you're talking. Because all the time you're talking about church. Then 2006, I had 4 slip discs. Okay, 2 on the cervical and the other 2 on the lumbar 4 and 5 regions. It's a crazy thing. I just moved this leg to get off the bed. I couldn't get off. So I was in traction for 9 months and I couldn't walk. She had to nurse me. And I said, God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I just got out of that, and the prophet comes and tells me, your life is a life that each time God gives you revelation, is going to touch your body literally. I said, give me a break. And just coming out of this slip disc, and just being all right, okay. Then I got into another issue of neuralgia. It's a nervous disorder. You do not know when the pain is going to come where, but it comes for a few seconds, okay. But it's a shooting pain. I said, come on, man, what is happening here? Okay, so sometimes, I have this issue, you must even notice today. I can't sit too long, I can't stand too long, I can't walk too long. Okay, and I thought to myself, and this prophet came and told me, because of much revelation, is keeping your head on your shoulder. And he said, I'm so sorry, this will carry on. Okay, I said, okay. Then coming to Gippsland, I was telling Brian some time ago, I said, look, your place was a Bethel. Now, when we came here 1st April 2018, I told them, I said, God is going to turn this around to Bethlehem. Bethel means house of God. Bethlehem means house of bread. I said, this place, the stables, is going to be a house of bread. You're going to have a motivational training center. And I said, I can see in the spirit people from all over the world coming here. First, people will come from all over Australia, because sale is equal to, they despise sale. Okay? But God is developing sale. And people are going to come and say, wow. Okay? So because of that, that's why I'm excited. To be part of that Bethlehem, to be that Bethel and Bethlehem.
So you'll be one of the bakers, baking the fresh bread. Would you want to touch on that school thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, because of this only we were telling Brian, so we thought, okay.
Yeah.
So he encouraged me and said, okay, go ahead, what do you have in mind? So I said, we'll start a kind of different Bible school. So I'm calling it the School for Lifelong Learning, Finishing Generation. And I was telling both of them, and I gave them the curriculum that I drew up. I said, this is going to be totally different. It's going to be interactive session. I'm not going to lecture. It's going to be learning together and applying. Learning and applying. Learning and applying. Okay, and people will begin to see, hey, it's doable. It's workable. So, the thesis that I'm writing now, okay, is theology made user-friendly. You need not be in a theological school to be a theologian to understand theology. Okay, is theology is all a theos is God. Logy is giving a logical understanding for God. And the people in the congregation, hey, they can just tap in. And can I be a help there? That's what I told these two gentlemen. They grabbed it.
Wow. It's just making theology more exciting and more
Yeah.
relevant to,
Yes.
just the simple minds.
Yeah. So I was just
Wow.
running through them. I said the first lesson that I will teach is,
Yeah.
what is the Bible? I'm going to tell it in a different way.
Yeah, but the way you were speaking today, and if you're going to run this school, I'm going to encourage my kids to jump on your online school. You've got this funny way of presenting deep stuff that makes you laugh, but you're stabbing us at the same time with the truth. You know what I'm saying? It's this prophetic teaching mixed with comedy. I'm not to say comedy that to demean you in any way, but you're just funny. So stay funny, please. Don't change.
Thank you. Just to finish off, that is why this all happened when I shifted from translucency
Oh, the
to
transparency.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, my goodness. Norman, please, you have been coming here for years, and this weekend, can you tell everybody what you sense and what you see God is doing in Sale, Gippsland, going forward?
This is what I saw today. I saw a new beginning taking place, and I saw a company of people standing together in right relationship, willing to form an alliance to bring about the plans and purposes of God for this area. And, in my heart I'm rejoicing because I know that Brian and Graham and we were involved in starting this off. Brian he would initiate it, and I was helping, and we did what we could. And it's like when you're training, you keep pushing yourself to levels you never attained before, and yet there's something more there that you can do better, you can go higher. And one of the things I realized today when I was being part of this gathering, I thought about our beginning and of Brian and Graham and the folks down here in Gippsland, and I realized that what God had been doing over all these years, and especially over the last 2 years in lockdown, God had been adding dimension after dimension after dimension into the lives of these men. And even though they had an attempt at one time in the past to make something happen, and we had a measure of success, we had an impact upon the region, and people were responding, but yet it wasn't what we were really after. Now I see that this time, that what's happening is now we're going to go, today I sensed this is another beginning. This is, and never be afraid to try something, and if it doesn't work out the way that you feel that it works out, have another go at it, because you're growing and you're developing all the time, and God is surrounding you with people who can resource you, who can stand with you. And if this has been put in your heart by God, get up and have another go and make it work. And I believe God is surrounding these precious people here in this area with the right people. I hear Pastor Jeremy talking about where he can make a really wonderful contribution. And I recognize the graces on each of our lives and how we complement one another. We are never in competition with one another. We complement. Where we see a lack, we jump in and we lend a hand. And I believe God has made you ready, and you already know all this anyway, but for the folks who are tuning in tonight, God has systematically grown and set Brian apart for the task that he has called him to do. He's surrounded him with the right people, and I believe this is God saying, this time you're going to go higher, you're going to go further, because a whole new level of stature has been built into these men's lives, and now this is the time. Maybe in the past we were excited to do something for God, but now I believe God's excited to do something for us.
I like that.
That's very good.
I like that. And Brian, I want to ask you to sum this whole thing up. we were excited to do something for God, but now God is excited to do something through us and with us. Something that really hit me hard on this trip was the next generation. And to look at all your spiritual kids and the stories of how they've just come together and help you restore this building, and businesses all around this building, run by spiritual children, kids that are coming to your church, and even your own biological kids. And I'm hearing from the next generation saying things about what they're doing, and then connecting that to your influence, you and Lynn, over their lives. Brian, I see an army of sons and daughters that has been raised. I mean, we've been focusing on what we are bringing to the city, but there's an army that has been raised. This will be the last one here, Brian. How did you manage to raise up all these kids? That's so good. Can we borrow you in Queensland for a year and you can help us do the same? But I'll have you answer that, and then you can also put a close to our session today.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of ways you can go about building church. One is you can build it around membership. And, you can do things to attract people to come to church. That's not hard. But I think that God, by the grace of God, has called us into the long game. And this is a generational work where, it's not an overnight work. We really have set our minds and hearts on raising true spiritual sons and daughters. So these are not like my daughters or my sons. It's an apostolic function where God gives you that fathering grace to really disciple, train, empower, and release. And it is incredible because this building, which was built in 1879, is a miraculous testimony in the city. And it couldn't have happened unless sons and daughters rose to complete the work. We used to run a program years ago called Training for Life. And this was these, 13 to 18-year-olds. And we talked about their day will come, and we just spoke prophetically over them. And now these ones have become, business operators. They've become accountants. They've become, my own daughter is nominating for the state parliament. There's so many of them that are coming through and touching different domains. So, we live by the philosophy that there's 7 mountains out there to be taken. You go and take your mountain. And I believe children play on the play equipment, but sons and daughters take mountains.
Awesome.
And this is what God's called us to do. But you can't do it alone. This is a partnership business.
Yes.
So I just want to thank God for, I've got to thank you first, because you've put up with me for 43 years. On our baptism day, which is probably about 41 years ago, the prophetic word was that we'd have many spiritual sons and daughters, and we never even knew what that meant. But I just thank God that for partnership, and then with Graham and Deanna and just their incredible heart toward us, to serve us and to love us, to armour bear us. These guys have been honestly, totally, incredibly selfless. Now that is very unusual, because their church is 150 metres that way. This is a God thing. I just think the world of you, God. I just love you guys. That's it.
Love you too.
It's amazing.
So we finish this together.
We do.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. This has been fantastic. Honestly, I'm loving it here. If my wife wasn't here, I would actually just stay here and not go back to Brisbane. It's so beautiful in here, but it's the spiritual climate, it's the dome that has been built over this region by these guys that you've just listened to. And I want to tell you the truth. God is actually doing something profound, significant in this city. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for receiving me and Tina with love and kingdom honor. We feel it, and we're leaving tomorrow, but I don't want to leave, to be honest. But I just want to say thank you again for being part of our program tonight. We're all family now. There are people all around the world that's watching this. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again, same time, same place, next Sunday. God bless you all. And we are signing out from this place, Sale, Gippsland. Let's go.